My work is site-specific. It's specific to the site that it's shown in. And when I was given the opportunity to show in the 24-hour gallery, the name of the gallery must have stuck in my head. And I decided to do a piece about time. And so I started to research time. The first thing I did was pick up a book. I came across this book by, interestingly enough, a Caltech professor, Professor Carroll. And Caltech is here in Pasadena. His book is called From Eternity to Here, and he talks about the arrow of time. Why do we experience time in a linear fashion, whereas we don't experience space in that same way? Why does time appear to have an arrow or a linear projection, whereas you can't go backwards with time in the way you can create other experiments that go backwards and work equally well in reverse. You can't do that with time. And so I started to read his book and get in a little over my head on the physics of time. And then I started to think about time in general and how time is sort of a cultural construct. It's a delusion, or it's a conception that we collectively agree upon. But our clocks are... that's what we go by in our culture, in 21st century culture. We go by clocks, 12-hour hands, 24-hour days, but previous cultures have used the sun or the moon to tell time, or even the whims of kings. And we've all agreed upon this construct that whether or not it has any basis in reality, we agree, we abide by it. The trains run on that schedule, the planes run on that schedule. We agree to show up at work at a certain point. And I started to want to question the idea of timekeeping in that way and sort of make irrational what we believe is rational in our society. And as I explored more deeply into time and the concept of time and the meaning of time, I started to look at the work of not only the physicists but philosophers such as Umberto Eco. And then I realized that poets are uniquely positioned to talk about time. And so I started to collect the work of poetry, more famous, well-known poets, and also poet friends in my milieu to incorporate into the piece. So what I did is I sent out a word to all my friends and colleagues and acquaintances, and I asked a simple question, which was, tell me something about time, or can you tell me a point in which time stood still or stands still for you? And I incorporated those writings and responses into the final piece. Along with these responses that I received, the poetry and the writing and the stories that I received about time from individuals, I started to collect time idioms, because those became very interesting to me. It's amazing how much time pervades our living. And so I collected over 350 idioms and culled it down for the show, and those are incorporated into the piece as well. The exhibition consists of 720 clocks. The reason I came upon the number 720 is on a 12-hour analog clock, on the face of the clock, if you represent each minute, it takes 720 minutes to do that. And what I did is I set each clock a minute apart. They're not lined up consecutively. They're lined up randomly, more aesthetically. But if you took the time to set them by time, you would find that each minute of the 12-hour dial is represented in the display. When I first conceived of the piece, I thought that I would just put the word out that I needed working battery-operated clocks, and that I would get 720 clocks from friends, colleagues, and former strangers to incorporate into the show. And I soon found out that very few people have analog clocks anymore. They use their iPods or their iPhones. They use the clock in the kitchen microwave, and very few people have clocks. And so I did get some from friends and acquaintances, but then I also had to start calling thrift stores and secondhand shops for clocks. That became expensive and time-consuming and ultimately futile, because I realized I wasn't going to be able to find all 720 clocks. And so I came upon these clocks from IKEA that were $2 a piece. They were within my price range, and I realized that they could be the perfect canvas for these quotes and idioms about time. So the IKEA $2 clocks became the backdrop for the rest of the piece. They became the bone structure, the foundation of the rest of the piece. They sit on the back wall, and then I printed idioms on the face of those clocks. And then in the foreground are the more unique clocks that I culled from friends and thrift stores and acquaintances.
And all the clocks have a second hand?
Not all of the clocks have the second hand.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Not all of them do. Some of them don't even have numbers on them, so I started to have to approximate and look at angles and see, is that really the time that I need? But in theory, each minute is represented, unless I messed up. If you would like to see this exhibit, it is open to the public 24 hours a day. It's at the southeast corner of Holly and Raymond in Pasadena in the windows. So you can drive by or walk by and see the exhibit at any point. And it's up until February 3rd, 2011. There are 5 windows, and in each window there are probably about 30 poets and writers represented, maybe more, maybe 50 poets and writers represented. Some of them are local poets, such as Hilda Weiss and Enrique Soufflé, and who else is local? Rick Gentry is represented. Julie Chase Daniel is from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And then many local writers, and just not necessarily writers by trade, but people who chose to share a story with me. And then we also have some famous poets represented, such as Pablo Neruda and T.S. Eliot and Shakespeare. Can't put a piece about time up without Shakespeare. Who else do we have up there? Many, many poets.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.